Here's a story that sums up how ludicrous the world is. It even goes beyond this. Pompeo's Guaido is the elected leader in Venezuela. UN ambassador for Israel waves a Bible at Security Council. This is a bloke called Danny Dannon. He's appeared in my books a number of times. Oh God. Israel's UN ambassador, Danny Dannon, is now claiming the Bible as proof to Israel's fundamental right to all of Palestine. Yep, I did just say that. During his speech at a UN Security Council meeting on Monday, Dannon held up a Bible for all the ambassador's president to see and said, "This is our deed to our land." And this whole Christian Zionism thing in America, which Pompeo is one and the vice president Mike Pence is one, was all created to be the American representatives of this idea that if it's in the Bible, then it's basically a legal contract. Who wrote the Bible? Well, I don't know. So because you've got these Christian Zionists who basically are Old Testament fanatics while talking about Jesus, they support what it said the Bible says, which is that Israel has a right to this land, or Jewish people have a right to this land. The fact that is well documented by Jewish historians and writers that Jewish people today have no connection to that land and actually don't originate from there at all, that's kind of irrelevant. Don't go there. In fact, censor anyone who says that. So the Bible is now a legal document which gives you rights to land. Dannon is claiming ownership to all of Palestine, which he calls Eretz Yisrael, and I've written about that many, many times in the books. That name is what they give to Greater Israel. What they say is the greatest extent in terms of size of biblical Israel. And it includes parts of Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Lebanon, and Syria. And this is what they are seeking. And now they are, thanks to Trump and that regime, they are on the verge of encompassing the whole of the West Bank, which is what they're now calling for. And this is always the plan. A two-state solution. That's what I agree. Anyone that tells you they believe in a two-state solution is either lying to you or not paying attention, because so much land in the West Bank now has been the occupied West Bank, illegally occupied West Bank under international law, is now covered in Jewish-only settlements. It's not racist or anything. That there is no land left for a two-state solution. The idea was always a one-state solution, which is Israel controls everything and it becomes a Jewish state, with only Jews having rights that non-Jews don't have. And they've just encompassed that into law, for goodness sake, with this nation-state law they've passed. But don't you say that or you're anti-Semitic, even though it's true. Well, especially if it's true. If it's true, it's really anti-Semitic. And anyway, so this is the game. And now it's like, I said earlier, the American regime in Washington doesn't really care if you know anymore. Well, it's controlled by that which controls Israel. Thus, Israel doesn't care if you know anymore. And so they're coming out with things openly that were in my books long ago. So annexing the West Bank is part of this creation of this greater Israel. And the upheavals in Syria and in other countries of the Middle East are all part of this whole operation. In Iraq, too, because this greater Israel goes from the Nile in Egypt, so some of Egypt's in it as well, to the Euphrates in Iraq. And anyone think they'll stop there? You must be joking again. Anyway, such a religious, literally biblical claim coming from a supposedly secular representative of a supposedly secular democratic state, comedy club material that, put forth to a serious political world assembly, may seem bizarre, this story says, to say the least. But it is actually not new, it's not. Nor isolated to the Israeli political right, which Danon belongs to through the Likud party of Netanyahu, which was created by a terrorist. On January the 8th, 1937, the New York Times reported how David Ben-Gurion was the first leader of Israel, was claiming the Bible as a kind of deed to the land in his testimony to the British Royal Peel Commission. He said, "We are coming to our own country by our own right of historic connection with the land." Well, absolutely, that's not true at all. A right prior to the British mandate, Britain in 1937 ran Palestine. As a matter of fact, he said, the Bible is our mandate. And the Deputy Foreign Minister has also used the Bible as a direct claim to all of Palestine. The land is ours, all of it is ours. We did not come here to apologize for that. We came to take it all and control it all, even though we have no historic connection to that land whatsoever. And the world looks on. And if you repeat something enough, oh yeah, we are our ancestors were those that were the Israelites. No, they weren't. No, they weren't. Provable fact. No, they weren't. But you say it enough times, people believe it. The old Nazi propaganda technique of keep repeating the lie and the lie becomes perceived truth. And it goes on in Israel, and the world looks the other way. Israeli army kills 4 Palestinians, including a baby and a pregnant mother in Gaza. The Israeli army killed 4 Palestinians, including a pregnant mother and a baby girl, in a series of bombings and airstrikes targeting the Gaza Strip, wounding more than 30 civilians. Spokesperson for the health ministry in Gaza has reported that the soldiers killed a pregnant Palestinian mother and her daughter. The mother, who was 6 months pregnant, suffered very serious wounds to the head and other parts of her body and died from her wounds. And it's just another day in Gaza. Now, what the response will be, and is always, is the Hamas, the what's called the Palestinian terrorist group, Hamas, fired rockets into Israel. Now, this is something else that I've noted in my books over the years. Whenever Israel wants another go at Gaza, because it wants rid of it and its people, Hamas starts shooting rockets, which are a tiny, tiny, infinitesimal fraction of the ones that come back in state-of-the-art weaponry provided not least by the United States and United States money. Hamas starts firing rockets into Israel whenever Israel wants a go at Gaza. So it's got the excuse, they shot first. Now, anyone think that's a coincidence? When it happens again and again and again and again? Of course it's not. And if you look at the history of Hamas, it was created with fundamental foundation help by the Israeli government. They wanted an opposition, divide and rule, to the former Palestinian Liberation Organization, led by a guy called Yasser Arafat. And so they manipulated the creation of Hamas to create divide and rule in the Palestinian community. And Hamas, I'm not saying everyone who's a member of Hamas knows this. They think they're fighting Israel, just like rank and file members of ISIS think they're fighting America, and their organizations created by them, America. But Hamas at its core, its controlling core, is an asset of Israel. And that's why it starts firing rockets into Israel when Israel wants another go at Gaza, which is what's happening now. Now, if you care about Palestinian people, right, and you're Hamas and you care about them, and you've seen what happens the other times you fired rockets into Israel, like mass murder has followed again and again, as Gaza's pepper bombed by the psychopaths of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, and you care about Palestinian people and children and families, what do you think would be a good idea? To fire some more rockets, knowing what's coming back? Of course not. But that's what they do. And that's what they're doing now. And they're getting the same response. Nothing is what it seems to be. Well, here's an exception. Trump administration may review US ties to countries and leaders deemed anti-Israel. Donald Trump, and my goodness me, this takes some doing, is the most Israel-controlled president in United States history. He gives the Netanyahu regime anything he wants. He's surrounded by Netanyahu and people above Netanyahu in the Trump administration, not least his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. I'm not saying he's above Netanyahu, but he's a lifelong friend of Netanyahu, and he's the senior advisor to Trump. But people who are above Netanyahu include Sheldon Adelson, who is Trump's and the Republican Party's biggest funder. He has his former bankruptcy lawyer, David Friedman, as ambassador to Israel, ambassador for Israel. His international negotiator, including on the Palestinian-Israel situation, is Jason Greenblatt, guy that ran the Trump organization. All of them ultra-Zionists. And here he is now, this week, saying that we are going to review our relationship with any country, and certainly anti-Semitism on the part of a country, with whom we have relations, because it's a deep concern. This was said by Ellen Carr, Special Envoy for Monitoring and Combating Anti-Semitism at the US State Department. Jewish population of the world is 0.2%. Around 16 million out of 7.7 billion. Why? Why this power? Why this concentration of power and influence? Worth asking? Oh, you can't ask that. That's anti-Semitic. The administration has been increasingly positioning anti-Zionism course, as a form of anti-Semitism, even though Zionism is a political philosophy, not a race. In a move, some policy analysts said, could prove popular among Jewish voters ahead of the upcoming 2020 elections. But hold on a second. Why would you do so much to appeal to Jewish voters when they're 2% of the population of America? Why? Well, the billionaire level, the ultra-Zionist billionaire level, like Sheldon Adelson, are the biggest group funders of American politics in both sides of the House, Democrat, Republican. That's why, or one reason why. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, he's back. He's warning someone else now. He said the administration was committed to relentlessly combating all forms of anti-Semitism during a March speech that referred to anti-Zionism as a form of anti-Semitism, which is a constant theme now. Macron in France came out with the same a few months ago. What they're doing is equating anti-Zionism and criticism of the Israeli far-right psychopathic regime in Israel with being anti-Jewish people in general. This is the connection they're making, so that anyone that criticizes the far-right psychopathic regime in Israel is an anti-Semite by definition. So this is, again, blatantly bloody obvious, and that scam has taken over the Labour Party in Britain, thanks to the jellybone backbone of its leader Jeremy Corbyn, who could have called it out but didn't have the bottle and the backbone to do so.